I think you need to see Jared Benny, you need to see the page flip.
The movie is a tricky movie because it is just a little bit period. And it's mostly in offices and restaurants and on streets.
You don't have explosions, you have metaphorical explosions, but you don't have much action.
When you think of the script, it's not necessarily the most visual film, but it is full of energy.
Should we try to close the door on this one? It makes no sense the door would be open.
You feel what these characters are going through. You get a sense of how they were positioned in this world.
It's not a fossilized period piece from 20 years ago. We're still living in the world in which the 2008 events happened.
Banking, it's rife with entitlement and greed. That certainly hasn't changed.
This explains a situation that is continuing to happen, and that anybody who has any money deposited anywhere should know because it directly affects everybody.
Our biggest challenge throughout the whole movie was making sure that everything always had a life. One of the problems with the way people deal with banking is they view it as this monolithic, unapproachable, perfectly crafted, steely entity. And it's not, of course. It's just regular people putting on suits, going to buildings that look monolithic and impressive. So one of the reasons I really wanted Barry Ackroyd to shoot this was that I wanted to humanize it. I wanted these to feel like people.
I look for something in a script that'll make you understand the world better, understand humanity better, be more open to ideas and things. You're not going to change the world, but you might change a few people's view of the world.
I think you should do the push all the way through. It's all back ahead. And then
Barry's technique of shooting is perfect for this because it creates a level of intimacy that we had to have for this movie. It also creates an urgency within the scenes too. So rather than just a guy on a phone from a medium shot, suddenly you're inside it, you're seeing pieces of him, and it becomes a whole little interior story that starts happening.
We try and bring the audience into the middle of the scene. It's much more observational. It feels like you're in the room with the subject, and therefore you listen harder.
Him using those long lenses creates this voyeuristic sense of intimacy, which is just thrilling and so exciting.
He has a way of being there, of putting you there, and it's almost like that's his magic, that's his art.
If you shoot it with that traditional proscenium frame and just 3-layer light it and make it look all glossy, it doesn't feel human. And then it intimidates a crowd, and the truth is there's no way any of us should be intimidated by banking.
Hey, excuse me.
Because Barry shoots that documentary verite style. He doesn't like to be on top of the actors. He doesn't want a dolly track running right under an actor's nose. He wants them to create the moment, and then he finds his way into it.
Remember that when you meet with the guys from Bear. I set you up with a face-to-face.
Also, where is that?
It's like a flow, a constant flow of thoughts and insight. And Barry on the camera, I forget that he's there. He could be here right now filming this and I wouldn't even know. It's very loose, and so you feel very free.
I talked with Barry about how we wanted to blend the styles, how sometimes we would go on dollies, sometimes we would be a little more classically framed, and I want the language to shift.
So in Florida, there is a more classical investigation.
Hello?
But when they realize that there's a bubble and they're walking through the airport, that's in handheld. So the form of the film really suited the way to tell the story.
I think it's sort of a new kind of filmmaking in some respects.
The choice to shoot on film for me was a no-brainer. I'd done Anchorman 2 on digital. It was the first movie I ever did on digital, and quite simply, I hated the way it looked. I just hated it. To me, there's just no question film looks better. It's got a warmth to it, it's got a depth.
It's a richer palette, cleaner, nicer look, and using a 500 ASA film stock for these interiors gives that film quality that when you shoot digitally, you're always promising we can add that in post.
It's analog, direct light imprinting chemicals versus the binary code that's translating it through it. And that sort of sharpness and coldness I knew for this story would not help us. And the same idea that these characters need to have intimacy, that need to have an urgency and a humanity to them within the frame extended to our other department heads too. So you never had that sort of flatness.
One of the mandates of our director, Adam McKay, and also our cinematographer, Barry Ackroyd, was that neither one of them wanted it to look like your typical Wall Street movie. And that wasn't difficult for me to do because we have these different groups of people that are such distinct personalities.
Susan Matheson, our wardrobe person, is just this ball of energy. She's just obsessive, and she got so detailed.
The biggest challenge was capturing the essence of the original people that the book was based on. So I started by speaking to absolutely everybody who was featured in the book that was willing to speak to me. For example, with Porter Collins, he said to me, you know, I'm very tall, I'm 6'5". So I never wear stripes because they just make me look taller. I always wear checks. So I made sure to never put Hamish in anything other than a check.
Where are you going?
I am going to try to find moral redemption at the roulette table.
And then what I did with Steve Carell is go up a couple sizes in everything. I made sure that his pants were a little too long because the character of Mark Boom is not trying to prove anything to anybody. He's a person who's very authentic, very much his own person, and is not trying to look slick. He's just trying to be comfortable.
I'm going on and on. My wife told me I need to share more.
And then you've got Michael Burry. Christian Bale really wanted to honor everything about Michael Burry, and so did I. Michael, the real Michael, doesn't like to feel the clothing on his body. He really likes things to be loose because he finds it really quite distracting. So he just wore t-shirts, a pair of Patagonia shorts, and a pair of Birkenstock sandals.
That's a nice shirt. Do they make it for men?
I don't know if it's necessarily the most exciting time for costume design. And there also was a certain authenticity to the way that they were shooting the movie that was very naturalistic.
There's subtle differences between now and 8 years ago. Everybody's wearing very skinny ties and very skinny pants and very skinny jeans now. But 8-10 years ago, that was absolutely not popular.
Susan did a terrific job with the wardrobe, sort of making it feel natural, but also tapping in a little bit to the sense of humor that the film has as well.
Morons.
When I came out of the trailer for the first time as that character, Steve Carell looked at me and he went, never do this again. Do it for this and then never do it again.
Oh boy. Your boss is about to explode.
No, he's too curious to explode.
Hank Corwin, brilliant editor, brings a feeling, a spirit, a tone that makes this story completely accessible to everybody.
I was just blown away by him on a daily basis. He's a master at his craft. He's edited some of the great films of all time, from Tree of Life to Natural Born Killers, and he can be impressionistic, he can be literal and truthful, he can cut for energy.
The big challenge for me as an editor was how to make this kinetic, how to make it move, how to make it interesting. Adam talked to me about a film that he loved, that he thought was sort of a seminal way to look at this film. It's called 24-Hour Party People. You know, it's very non-linear, it's very free-flowing, and it gave me permission to try editorially taking the film to kind of a different place. And we were able to actually put together a film that was really entertaining, but kind of surreal.
Adam and Hank, Corwin, the editor, they've done such a wonderful job of making it relatable, making it understandable. Seeing this stock footage in between means much more than a date. I look on a date on screen, it takes me a little while to go, what the hell was I doing at that time? Whereas I hear a song or I see a clip from the news and I instantly know, right, bang, I know exactly what I was doing at the moment that all this other stuff was going on.
You can read our agreement.
Do not throw our inception agreement in my face, Michael. We had an underlying understanding you wouldn't act like a goddamn crazy man.
This is not crazy. It's all very logical.
Michael Burry, the cutting of his stuff initially was very surreal, very quiet.
Morgan Stanley building, fast.
Mark Baum was very aggressive, and the editorial took no prisoners. I mean, it didn't matter if there were jump cuts. It didn't matter if some of the jump cuts were ugly. That sort of enhanced the mania of it.
Hank understood from the beginning the chaos of what happened. I mean, really, the speed with which everything was happening, and cut the movie deliberately to try and recreate that fun ride that we were on.
This is crazy stuff. Shit, he's saying that there's 10-to-1 returns on credit default swaps for mortgage-backed securities.
And then you had the Brad Pitt group, and they were young and earnest, but I tried to cut that much more conventionally, much more lyrically.
He does this one move that I just love, which is he'll just chop off dialogue at the end of a scene. Someone will start to say something and you'll cut to the next scene. And it gives this sense of like, it's not resolved. It's just electric when you use it in the right way. It's really amazing to see that.
What the hell is going on?
You can cut right in the middle of a sentence, right in the middle of a word, just to move on. And it gives you momentum. It's not something you do all the time, but you can actually make a statement about the person who's speaking by where you cut out of where they're speaking. You can actually editorialize that way.
Defaults over 8% were impossible.
Oh my
God. That there would be 1 million homeless.
I've always had really good editors, but I've never experienced anything like this. And just a dream to work with.
I think we should buy more swaps.
What?
Suck it up and pay up, fellas. We made a deal.
No way. No.
Fucking kidding me? You come in here, you fucking
seriously
fucking
No. No.
It's such an important subject, and it's so beautifully written, and it's so beautifully shot, and so beautifully acted, and I hope the editing communicates the story.
Maybe I'll run it with whatever setups you guys get. I'll run it with Joey coming in and just see what we can get. Everyone who worked on this movie just did an amazing job of capturing the essence of what's happening.
If you're taking a particular episode, but you're setting it against a landscape that you think remains wildly true today as it did then, that only confirms its relevance.
Go directly to your transportation.
That's just
Do not
fucking great.
talk to your press.
I'll talk to whoever the hell I want.
It's not the Wall Street of the mind. It's not the Wall Street of ideals. It's not a Wall Street that you've seen before.
We've all stepped out of our comfort zone a little to lift those words which are on a page into a real, living, dynamic, fun, entertaining, and informing way. I think we've achieved that for sure.
And action. We had the script, Paramount liked it, and I said, look, can I send this to some actors just to see if there's any interest? And they were great. They said, yeah, of course. And so Dee Dee Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and I sat down with our producers, Kevin Messick, Robin Woolley, and we looked through the lists, and then they started calling back. They're interested. I was like, what? Then it was like, yes, yes, yes.
The default rates are already up from 1% to 4%.
I think the reason so many actors wanted to be a part of it was because it's a chance to be a part of something that really does affect everyone.
And then Brad Pitt signs on, and then it really gets nuts. And you're like, this is the craziest cast ever.
I don't know how these actors do this. They just pick up on the character. There are times I had chills going down my spine. They even looked like the people.
Collateralized debt obligation. It's when we take a bunch of unsold Bs, double Bs, and triple Bs, and we put them in a pile.
If you look at Ryan Gosling's take on Jared Bennett, he is a character of great intensity. He speaks his mind. He sometimes goes on tangents.
First of all, how was your travel? How are you?
Well,
uneventful?
Uneventful.
Okay, I've been here for 6 hours. I've already been to the gym. I had 2 poached eggs, and I played blackjack with Harry Dean Stanton.
Thank you for your diary.
Jared Bennett is not lying about who he is. He's not lying about why he's doing what he's doing. He was there to get rich. He says it at the outset of the movie.
And yeah, I got a bonus check for it. Sue me.
Jared Bennett's one of the characters in the movie that's kind of funny. He breaks fourth walls and is a little bit the narrator of the movie, sort of guides us through the whole journey. And so right from the beginning when I was writing the role, I was like, this has to be Ryan Gosling.
That's right.
My character is a bit of an anomaly in the movie because he has a foot in the reality of the movie and he also is the narrator. So this allows him the kind of power to move through space and time and to be the tour guide for the audience, but then also to sort of be present in the immediate drama.
Jacked! I'm jacked to the tits!
Ryan Gosling's performance is one of the most delightful, fascinating things in this film.
I never hung out with these idiots after work, ever. I had fashion friends.
Specifically in my character's case, he really is the least like the real person of any of them in the film because he is the narrator. So a lot of license had to be taken with that role, and he really did become very different than the real person.
He was the perfect guy, and we just had a blast. We would do takes of scenes, and we would do them 3 completely different ways. I wouldn't even throw him the idea. He would just have like 3 or 4 funny lines.
When that happens.
What is that?
That's the American housing market getting fucked.
You get a feeling from him, there's a creative ball of energy there that's just exciting to be around.
Mike Burry of San Jose, a guy who gets his hair cut at Supercuts and doesn't wear shoes, knows more than Alan Greenspan and Hank Paulson.
Yeah, Dr. Mike Burry, yes he does.
Dr. Michael Burry, played by Christian Bale, is emotionally very much anchoring this film.
He just looks at the facts. If it meant he had to read 11,000 pages of mortgage-backed securities, then that's what he would do. He never gets cowed by the notion of, well, 11,000. Like, there's not a number after which he thinks, oh, I can no longer do the work.
Christian has a work ethic like I've never seen. He's a little bit like Michael Burry in the sense that Michael Burry's all about the work, and that's the way Christian is. It was the first day you could see him just dial in, and then boom, he was the guy for the rest of the movie.
This is a person that spent quite a long time with Michael Burry, talking to him, getting certain mannerisms down.
I think Christian understands Mike Burry. I think he understands him sort of in his DNA.
He's a good guy, and I wanted to try and get that across. And there's an awful lot of details and mannerisms and all that kind of stuff. That's good, that's good. You use it as sort of a mask to get your way through the character, but none of it means crap unless you get the essence of the guy.
I don't know how to be sarcastic. I don't know how to be funny. I don't know how to work people. I just know how to read numbers.
You're playing real people, how much do you do the real people? And that was really the first discussion with Christian Bale about how much he was gonna do this real guy. And our decision was he was gonna use the real guy as a sounding board, get the specificity, which you really can't fake, and then fill it out with other choices. And that ended up becoming kind of the code for the movie.
The drumming with the double kick drums, I loved the drumming so much. And starting off, I've never drummed before in my life. Totally addicted to it now.
95. It's 30 days late, 60 days late.
There's a scene in the film where you experience a process of thought that got him to realize this bombshell idea.
FICO scores.
And what Christian was doing to dramatize thought was one of the most amazing things I've ever witnessed.
So get this, Cynthia wants me to quit and open a B&B in Vermont.
I'd love to see Mark Baum run a B&B. Here's your steel-cut oatmeal, asshole.
If Michael Burry is kind of the oracle, the lone oracle who saw this before anyone else, I would say Front Point are much more the street-level guys. And the center of Front Point is Mark Baum, who's Steve Carell. And he's the fiery guy who doesn't trust the system.
Mark Baum, in some ways, is the hero of the film. He's incredibly bright and idiosyncratic and a very particular, loquacious, gregarious character.
Hey, hey, hey! No, my cab. That's my cab. That's my cab.
He's sort of an unlikely hero. He's a guy who has a very strong moral compass, and at the same time, he is immersed in this world that isn't necessarily ruled by moral compasses.
Those same banks got greedy, they lost track of the market, and I can profit off of their stupidity? Fuck, yeah, I want them to be right.
He really humanizes all of what happens at this time. And through his character, you really see the ups and the downs and the weight of what all this means.
Steve brought a natural empathy for that journey. He and McKay had this wonderful relationship which goes back 20 years.
I've known Steve Carell for a long time. We actually did Second City together way back in Chicago in like 1993, which is how we cast him as Rick Tamlin in Anchorman. And we all knew Steve was a good actor, but when I saw Foxcatcher, I was like, holy crap. He may have been the biggest surprise of the whole movie to me in that I knew he was gonna be good. I didn't know he would be unbelievably good.
The bank calls you up. They give you the bonds they want to sell. They give you clients. They give you money to run your business. Give you fat fees for doing so. But you represent the investors? Is that right?
Yeah. Where Steve gets to in his performance, your heart is breaking for this person. He's having a dark night of the soul where he's questioning everything.
I met with a few people who represent this character and talk to them and pick their brain. And it's interesting because you don't want to try to do an impersonation of someone, but you do kind of want to glean an attitude and a way of being that these people have. And especially the people whose memory of this is still very fresh. This is not a distant history for these people. This was both a tragic and a shining moment for them.
He's harder on himself than anyone I've ever seen. He's incredibly rigorous. He did an enormous amounts of work, constantly with Adam dial the nuance of what he was achieving in each beat.
There's this rigor to the way he works where he really is constantly pushing himself take after take. He would do takes where I was like, Steve, that was great. And he'd go, no, there's more there. And I'd be like, all right. And sure enough, he would find something.
No one's acting responsible. Fuck responsibility. Fuck it. We're gonna take a knife, we're gonna shove it in, we're gonna stick it into the hilt, and we're gonna make those assholes at the big banks.
You boys want anything else?
We're talking! Excuse us.
And cut. Cut. The Steve Carell, Jeremy Strong, Hamish Linklater, Rafe Spall group. They are so cohesive as a group, and they all bring such specific tones and realities to it that I think you just really enjoy being with them.
Gentlemen, I spoke with Mark Baum. He says to fuck off.
Jeremy did all the research. He knew the financial world. He knew all the terminology. He knew Vinny. He spent time with Vinny. He spent time with Front Point. He completely became Vinny.
How are you fucking us?
There's a nice way to say that, Vinny.
I'm serious. We'll buy your swaps, but only if you say how you're fucking us.
Vinny described himself to me as a gambler, as a professional gambler. They were a little more kind of Robin Hood's Band of Merry Men, and everyone's looking for a good bet, a great bet. But these guys, as outsiders, I think it gave them a particular vantage point to see what people in the weeds couldn't really see.
In my mind, they're the good guys of the story. Yes, they profited off other people's misery, but they felt appropriately guilty about it.
You know, once we sell, we'll be just like the rest of them. You know that.
No, we're not. We're not the bad guys here. We didn't defraud the American people and prey on their dreams of owning a home. All right, they did.
Now we get to kick them in the teeth.
And their shorting of the housing market was anarchic and naughty, and not necessarily for simply personal gain.
Rafe's just an actor, man. He came in for the audition, you know, he's English, he's an accent, carried himself totally different. I'm like, why is this guy in here? And he goes, all right, should we read it? And then instantly became a completely different person. So I knew with Rafe, I had maximum flexibility, that character could adapt and change to whatever we needed. One of the great scenes for Rafe is when all the guys are just chatting before Mark Baum comes in the room.
I have an extremely pronounced epididymis.
I'm riveted by this. Do you have any pictures?
Almost as large as another testicle.
And Rafe really drove that improv. He just had all these kind of unique, strange stories to tell, like these guys would talk about, and he was always just game. Rafe also has the most expressionistic face, too. Some of the great Rafe moments are just him reacting to things. His face just instantly registered.
I hear the food has gotten really good in Vegas. They have a Nobu now. You fucking stop it.
I played Porter Collins, the handsome one. Rafe Spall and I do our traveling together and bicker like a sweet old married couple.
I heard the Cuban food is amazing in Miami.
Please don't be chipper in the face of me being miserable. It really makes me hate you.
Hamish was able to do a very hard thing, which is straddle the line between this kind of patrician Ivy League vibe, yet still being able to joke around and like give Danny Moses, Rafe Spall a hard time to bust balls.
You take longer with a wrong number than anybody else.
Adam's cast people who work in a certain way, so it's just us building our relationship so that we talk like we've known each other for a while.
What's the ABX at?
What's ABX?
It tracks subprime mortgage bond value. Go back to sleep.
And actually, Jeremy Strong, I've known for about a decade already. Steve, I've seen him in The Office. And Rafe, I just hit it off with really well. So it's more rapport.
No one on the planet is betting against AA. The banks will think we're either high or having a stroke, and they'll take every dime we have to offer. Kind of brilliant.
Early on, I had said, there is a role for Brad, and they were like, he just did a Michael Lewis movie, he's not gonna do it. I go, that's fine. And then later, they kind of sat down in my office, Dee Dee and Jeremy, and were like, well, we have some news. And I thought they were gonna say, Paramount's not making it, or Brad hated it. And they were like, Brad wants to be in it. And I was like, why are you saying this in a serious tone of voice? Shouldn't we jump up and down?
Ben Rickard's funny. His logic leads him to the conclusion that a lot of bad or apocalyptic outcomes are upon us. But the way Brad plays it, it's just totally natural. There's nothing paranoid about him. He's not unstable. He just sees the world the way it is, and this leads him to these conclusions.
Ben Rickard.
Ben, why do you do that, man? I mean, you're a retired trader, okay? No one is listening to your calls.
The NSA has $52 billion budget and the ability to monitor
Tens of million calls a second. You think they're not using it?
I promise I will refrain from saying Ben Rickard and Dirty Bomb in the same sentence.
Brad really ran with that. He just had a lot of fun getting into that and did a lot of research. So Brad has some great improvised scenes where he's talking about seeds. Don't use the Monsanto seeds, you have to have the pure seeds.
Seeds are going to be the new currency. And not those Franken seeds from Monsanto. I'm talking about good, healthy, organic seeds. Make yourself a garden. Learn to live off the land.
I think he liked the idea that it's a guy who clearly had tremendous success in the industry and who had become disillusioned with the level of greed in our culture and with this moral ambiguity.
Ben's not just some crazy prepper. Everything he's doing is backed up by pretty decent data. The combination of it all seems pretty crazy, and that was one of the really fun things for Pitt in playing this character.
He has this dry humor about him that he's bringing to this extremely neurotic character. That's very subtle and just a lot of fun.
There's great comic relief, but he also says something of great importance.
If we're right, people lose homes, people lose jobs, people lose retirement savings, people lose pensions.
Slowly, you just see them throughout the movie becoming aware that this is where it could end up.
Will you listen to me? This is like the end of capitalism. This is like the Dark Ages all over again.
John Magaro, just another one of these guys, like New York actor, really fluid, comfortable with improv, just game every single day.
You say what scene is this? This is the one where you call your mother.
Well, this is the mother scene. Bates, I need my phone.
We had a great actor for Jamie. We cast Finn Whitrock, and he was perfect. He just got that earnestness, and I get the sense from Finn he can kind of do anything.
Jamie and Charlie's story, it's a very simple story. It's a story of two young guys trying to gain a seat at the table.
B of A and Bear didn't even return our calls, and even fucking Wachovia blew us off, man.
But they imbue it with such kind of depth, and they play off each other in really funny ways, and watching them improvise with each other, it's just so fantastic.
The biggest challenge on this is getting to a point where you are comfortable enough and understand enough what's happening to be able to riff on it. And that took a lot of research to get to there, but then once we were there, and once John and I were kind of on the same page about it, then it got pretty easy.
He and John just loved that I would let them improvise, and we got a bunch of great beats off of just letting them go loose.
The film, like soup to nuts, has wonderful performances. It's so much fun to be around these actors, and I think all the actors, Ryan, Steven, and Christian, they were dialing into those people's experiences.
Any chance we had, we wanted to humanize this environment. We wanted to remind people that this is flesh and blood, and everyone had this connection with the real people and the real story, and everyone like stepped towards it rather than stepping away from it. And if we've done this movie right, it should be enjoyable as well as sort of eye-opening.
There you are.
And action. Big bank, small bank, I like to make money.
Subject matter like this is very difficult, but it really depends on the filmmaker that you're working with.
I'm sorry, are you for real?
If I went to anyone going, I want to do a film about financial crisis, they'd have gone, bloody hell. But Adam managed it.
All right, I buy that. Adam McKay has done a brilliant job adapting it and making it accessible and giving it some lift.
Boom! Yeah, man!
You know, obviously Adam's known for his work in comedies, but he's also a very thoughtful person and committed to the story, to this world.
This market won't last.
It's not a typical Adam McKay film, but he shoots it like an Adam McKay movie, which means that the subject matter which we're discussing, while dense, is going to be super funny and super entertaining.
Can you introduce us?
Yes! Yes!
Ira Glass on This American Life ended one of his episodes by saying, like, this episode brought to you by The Big Short. I read it. It's one of the best books I've read. And so I was interested in this subject, so I got the book. And I picked it up one night. I was in bed and ended up reading the whole book the entire night. And my wife was like, what were you reading? I was like, I just read the most amazing book. And she's like, you should do it. And I was like, you know, I'm the guy who did Step Brothers. Like, I'm sure someone already has this. So I didn't even look into it. And then it was probably 4 years later, my agent asked me, if you could do anything, what would you do? So I started talking about some action films, and he goes, no, anything. I go, and right away, before I even knew I was saying it, I said, well, if I could do anything, I would do The Big Short. Like, why hasn't that been made into a movie? It's one of the best books of this age that I've read. And he goes, hold on one second.
His agent called us and said, Adam McKay loves The Big Short. He's really interested in it. And I remember saying, that's an amazing idea, and hanging up the phone, and then also going, I'm really upset that I didn't come up with that idea myself, because it's such a natural fit for the material.
We had the book and we had the script and we couldn't take the next turn. So when Adam called, we thought, thank God.
And he called me back and he goes, all right, it's at Plan B, Brad Pitt's company. There's nothing going on with it. And I go, would they take a meeting with me? He's like, yeah, they were kind of excited about the idea.
And action.
I'm a massive fan of his films. I would say he was almost like a jazz musician in the sense that his films are outrageous and anarchic and chaotic, but they also have a very clear structure.
Anyone who knows Adam's work knows that he's a ferocious mind, an avid political thinker, a very active political thinker.
You know, I think a lot of people obviously know me from movies like Talladega Nights, Step Brothers, Anchorman, those types of movies, and Funny or Die, and comedy. You know, that's been most of my background, but I used to write a lot of political articles, and I just feel like you gotta vote, and you gotta know what you're talking about.
I want to work with people who are obsessed with what they're doing, you know. I don't want to work with anyone who's just sort of phoning it in and, yeah, it's all right, I could do it or do something else. I want someone who's going, I gotta do this film, I gotta do this film. And Adam was so obsessed with this.
Based on the market, banks, and popular culture, yes, it's a foolish investment, but everyone's wrong.
It took someone willing to think a little differently because Adam McKay is not the obvious director to make this. I mean, he's made broad comedies until now, and this is not a broad comedy. It's funny a lot, but it's a drama. I mean, it's a tragedy, basically, right? It's a funny tragedy.
The mortgage-backed security, or private label MBS.
It's a murky world. You know, you read the book, you read the script, you meet these people, you try to piece it all together, and it's a different language. It's not a language that I grew up knowing.
Mortgage-backed securities, subprime loans, tranches. Does it make you feel bored or stupid? Well, it's supposed to.
It can get thick and complicated. Adam cuts through it. Adam understands it. Adam can break it down, and not in a dry way.
Here's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath to explain.
I'm just a big believer in you do what you need to do to tell the story. And part of the part of the scam that the banks ran was that they would use this impenetrable, boring language to describe stuff. So if you can't get past that, you can't understand the scam.
So whenever you hear subprime, think shit. Got it? Okay.
I kept thinking of different ways to do it, and then finally I said, look, do what needs to be done, which is just say it.
It's about taking an idea and just building on it, right, in various shades. And that's a little bit of what he does here, right? He takes an idea like the collateralized debt obligation, and he sort of unfolds it and unpacks it and gives you different aspects of it and finds new ways of communicating it in this crazy, you know, manic way that's really enjoyable.
A collateralized debt obligation. It's important to understand because it's what allowed a housing crisis to become a nationwide economic disaster. Here's world-famous chef Anthony Bourdain to explain.
I'm a chef on a Sunday afternoon, setting the night's menu at a big restaurant.
I'm trying to explain how some extremely complex financial instruments work. And I'm the right guy for the job. As a close observer of Wall Street and, actually, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I ordered my fish on Friday, which is the mortgage bond that Michael Burry shorted.
When the crime is so sophisticated and the perpetrators exist in a world so hard to understand or relate to, chances are they're going to keep getting away with it.
That is a CDO.
The nice thing about comedy is it lets you tell people things very directly in a way that they appreciate and doesn't feel like you're asking them to eat their potatoes.
There's a lot to try to understand. It's a complicated world. But to have these celebrities as themselves explain it to you somehow makes it more palatable.
Here's Dr. Richard Thaler, father of behavioral economics, and Selena Gomez to explain.
Okay, so here's how a synthetic CDO works. What I love about what they're doing here is they're finding ways to explain it to people so that when they watch it, myself included, will understand everything that's going on. Yeah. And I had talked to Adam when I got here, and using my platform for things like this is why I love my job.
Adam sort of pulls the curtain back by saying that it is designed to make you feel stupid, and he casts a really wide net with all of these techniques in order to sort of find access points for the audience. Vinny lost his father to a violent crime when he was young.
I don't talk about that.
There's some direct-to-camera stuff, and it lends just another dimension, I think, and tying it to reality in a way, reminding us that this really happened, reminding us that these are real people.
Our investment strategy was simple. People hate to think about bad things happening, so they always underestimate their likelihood.
There's plenty of movies that have played with breaking the fourth wall. It certainly happens in theater all the time, and I have a theater improv background. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do it because they think it's going to fracture the reality I don't agree. I think it creates a relationship with the audience where you're trying to include them.
This is what we did that no one else thought of.
And it's an interactive thing watching a movie. And why pretend that they're like looking through a weirdly shaped box at reality? Like, we all know you're watching a movie.
I told you we'd meet later. Unfortunately, it's in a place like this, which I would never be. I never hung out with these idiots after work, ever. It acknowledges to the audience that we know that this is a movie and that it's not trying to sort of pull one over on you. So, in a way, hopefully, when you get into things that are true and truths that you are trying to expose, maybe the movie has earned the audience's trust.
His name's Yang. He doesn't even speak English.
Actually, my name's Jiang, and I do speak English. Jared likes to say that I don't because he thinks it makes me seem more authentic.
There's a basic truth and spirit of how the events took place, and I think that makes the audience feel welcomed in as part of the storytelling.
Okay, so this part isn't totally accurate. Truth is, a friend told Charlie about it, and I read about it in Grant's Interest Rate Observer.
I don't know how, but it really bloody works in this.
I think Adam brings a very unique perspective, and I think he has a great quality of being able to be outraged by something without losing his sense of humor about it. I think as a filmmaker, it creates for very interesting films.
Stop. Dude, talk to the director. He asked me to do this. I would never do this, trust me.
You do realize you're in public, right?
When you're doing comedy all day long when you're on set, you're thinking of alternative jokes, you're thinking of improv runs, you're constantly pounding whatever you're doing.
Let me figure out what exactly you're gonna say.
So yeah, the improv, the alts that I use in comedy were used in this, but in different ways.
Turns out I have a very large thing called an epididymis.
The first few times we will tape the very tight script that he's written, which is extremely detailed. And then Adam, after we've got that in the can, likes to open things up a little bit and let things breathe and mess around with things and try things, and he'll shout things out for you to say. So it's a really exciting way of working, which lends itself to a large element of naturalism.
Really good take, though. That was great. I think this is probably the most fun and loosest set I've ever been on. And I think with a movie that has so much dialogue in offices and could be a stationary movie, Adam's sort of spontaneity really brings that to life.
I can still love guns and be a liberal.
And cut. So here's what we're gonna do this time. If you get a burst on this next take, act like it's what you meant to do.
Adam is so playful, and we try all sorts of different things, and we're out laughing on set. And I think it's really important to do that because this is some heady stuff, and finding creative and clever ways to help tell that story and these complex ideas is required. Otherwise, it would be pretty rough.
It's like 2 + 2 = fish.
Initially, it did surprise me how great they were with improv. But then I realized, oh, it makes sense. These are all top level actors, and they're so in their character that once you're in that state, you can't go wrong.
Wall Street took a good idea, Louis Ranieri's mortgage bond, and turned it into an atomic bomb of fraud and stupidity that's on its way to decimating the world economy.
He's not trying to talk down to an audience. He's not trying to lecture an audience. He's trying to show an audience something that they can understand. And that's the basic populism and basic spirit of Adam McKay.
Tell me the difference between stupid and illegal and I'll have my wife's brother arrested. I can identify with probably most of the audience, which is that this is a world and subject matter I never thought could be very interesting or that I would really completely understand. And I think that Adam and the whole team have really done a great job of shaking the rug and showing you what it really is and helping you to have an understanding of it.
His love for the characters, his commitment to telling the real story in a way that everyone could understand, that was thrilling.
Yes!
That's right.
Cut!
This is a brownfield fund. I'm wanting to unload my credit default swaps.
All right, what you got?
20 AA tranches of ABS CDOs.
Wall Street loves to use confusing terms to make you think only they can do what they do.
Obviously, when you first hear phrases like collateralized debt obligation and credit default swap and all these financial terms they say, they're confusing and they make you feel stupid and they make you feel bored.
What's the ABX at?
What's ABX?
It tracks subprime mortgage bond value. Go back to sleep. There are these areas of knowledge that are very closed off to everybody else. They're so complex. Only very few people can understand them.
That's my quant.
Your what?
My quantitative.
So much of the terminology that's difficult to understand is designed that way for a reason, so that you feel like it's something you could never understand, and therefore you're sort of easier to take advantage of.
We have no confidence in your ability to identify macroeconomic trends.
It's like legalese, and they'll just kind of rattle off to you about, well, the MBS and the CDO and the CDS and the da-da-da-da-da, and making you stop them to say, I don't know what that is. And they enjoy that. And they love seeing you squirm, thinking like, oh man, I feel stupid.
We want to do 15 million in swaps on the AA tranche.
I don't understand. It's like watching a movie about card counting. If you know how the method of card counting works, it's 5 times more exciting.
Who understands this stuff? It makes no sense.
There's a spiraling of the complexity. It's not just loans anymore. The loans are packaged into bonds. The bonds are tradable. Derivatives of the bonds get created. Wall Street was changing in fundamental ways that were going to lead to a disaster.
The difficulty with this film is always how do we entertain while we also educate. We brought on Adam Davidson, who is a pretty well-known guy in the financial world and economics. He's like one of the premier journalists of that field.
At various points, I came in to help people understand how this world works. What is going on? What's the secret language people are speaking, and why they get so worked up about confusing language that most of us don't understand.
America barely noticed as its #1 industry became boring old banking.
If you look at America from 1982 to 2007, it's this period of really healthy financial market growth. But economic success breeds a complacency, and it created a sense of, oh, we've cracked this.
I sold that house for $350 the year it was built. 2 years later, $480. Then $585, maybe 18 months ago.
By the 1980s, homes had become the bedrock asset upon which our economy is built. Depending on the year, something like 65% of Americans owned a home, and it was the majority of their assets. It was the majority of their wealth, but it wasn't an exciting source of growth. It wasn't an exciting source of innovation.
Boring. That is until Louis Ranieri came on the scene at Salomon Brothers.
It really changes a lot, as the movie shows, with Lou Ranieri and others who create these mortgage-backed bonds that allow banks to lend people money but then very quickly sell on the debt.
Business is good, and the mortgage continues to be the bedrock on which this economy is built.
We have the MBS, which is the mortgage-backed security that Lou Ranieri created.
What exactly is the credit rating on this bond?
This bond, gentlemen, is AAA rated.
Then you have the CDS, the credit default swap.
I want to buy a credit default swap that will pay off if the underlying bond fails.
Which is the bet against the mortgage-backed securities.
He's saying that there's 10-to-1 returns on credit default swaps for mortgage-backed securities.
So then, when things really got scary, they created a collateralized debt obligation, the CDO.
It's important to understand because it's what allowed a housing crisis to become a nationwide economic disaster.
And those were really the toxic assets.
This is where we take a bunch of Bs, double Bs, and triple Bs that haven't sold, and we put them in a pile. And when the pile gets large enough, the whole thing is suddenly considered diversified.
These things don't even make sense, and there are billions and billions of dollars of these things sold all over the place.
How many loans do you write each month?
About 60.
Yeah. What was it 4 years ago?
10, maybe 15.
Once we're in like 03, 04, 05, as the housing market is exploding, the bond sales were going from a few billion to tens of billions to hundreds of billions. It had lost all rationality because every mortgage comes with a really nice fee attached.
I make $2,000 on a fixed rate prime, but I can make $10,000 on a subprime adjustable.
In the frenzy years of 05, 06, you just need people to fill out mortgages and get those mortgages through the system.
If I write a loan on Friday afternoon, big bank is gonna buy it by Monday lunch.
Yeah, same here.
And so the bank is saying, we don't care about how much money they make or if they have a job.
My firm offers ninja loans. No income, no job. You know, I just leave the income section blank if I want.
The Wall Street traders who were packaging mortgage loans into bad mortgage bonds are getting paid on volume, and they get paid a lot at the end of each year.
I need the CDO machine to run for another 2 years, and then I'm rich as fuck, and I got my house in Aspen.
As long as they get to the end of the year and nothing's blown up, they're fine. If the firm goes down after that, they still have their big pile of cash.
Say that again. CDO A has parts of CDO B, and CDO B has parts of CDO A, but then they both get put inside CDO C.
Yeah, that one's called CDO squared. CDO of a CDO.
These CDOs had become the primary assets for tons of major banks, for tons of governments and pension funds, and we literally had no idea. Are they worth 1 cent on the dollar? Are they worth 80 cents on the dollar? We have no idea.
And then there's CDOs made up of the opposite side of the bet you made with your swaps. We call them synthetic CDOs.
What did you Synthetic CDOs.
Synthetic CDOs.
That is fucking crazy.
It's not. It's awesome.
A synthetic CDO, that is all of our gatekeepers are either criminals or idiots.
What about the ratings agencies? Moody's, S&P, are they downgrading the CDOs or mortgage bond?
Nope, they're all still AAA.
What the hell?
With the ratings agencies, there was a sense that they had public responsibility in addition to a need to make profits. And they've been run more recently as short-term profit-seeking enterprises.
Well, the delinquency rates do have people worried, but they're actually within our models.
The ratings agencies, they didn't want to lose business, and so they were rating how their clients wanted the ratings to be, not how they truthfully were.
If we don't work with them, they will go to our competitors. Not our fault, simply the way the world works.
The fact that they were rating these things 92% AAA, the safest risk, is insanity.
You're selling ratings for fees.
And they're a big part of the reason that this whole collapse happened, the ratings agencies. It's amazing they got away with what they did. I mean, they really should have been shut down.
We're about to invest in housing bonds, and I was wondering if the SEC is worried about them at all.
The SEC is supposed to monitor all this stuff. They're the guys who are in charge.
Oh, we don't investigate mortgage bonds. Truth is, since we had our budget cut, we don't investigate much.
Anytime you have an industry that's being regulated, in which people make 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times as much money as the regulators, the industry's gonna end up owning the regulators.
I'm floating my resume to some big banks.
How are you floating your resume to big banks? I mean, you're supposed to be the ones, policing the big banks.
Grow up, Jamie.
If you're a young person with any ambition at the SEC, you're very likely thinking that your strategy to make a living in the long term is to go work for one of the big banks.
There must be some kind of law against working for a financial institution right after you've been working in financial regulation, right?
No.
And this is just assumed to be normal. I mean, nobody says, isn't that a conflict? You would think someone would stand up and say, wait a minute, if you guys are actually thinking as you're supposed to be regulating these people, that really what you want to do is go work for these people, isn't that gonna make it hard to tell them no when they ask for something?
The manufacturing index also fell in the month of March, warning that economic growth could slow. Now, the Institute of Supply Management also reported a rise in prices.
I'm gonna call my mom.
In March, April, May, June of 2007. That's when it starts to become undeniable that housing prices are falling, defaults are rising, and the housing market is in severe distress, and home prices are overinflated.
The market's in an itsy-bitsy little gully right now. It's like everybody said, okay, that was crazy, let's just all calm down.
The housing market has never failed in our history, so it's not going to now. No matter how bad it looks, no matter what people are saying. I mean, literally right up until the bottom fell out, people were saying this. It can't happen with the housing market.
Subprime bonds fell off a cliff. Rumor has it, default numbers are huge.
The nature of the calamity was in our lifetimes unprecedented. So the sense that this had never happened before probably misled people into thinking it couldn't happen.
In the entire history of Wall Street, no investment bank has ever failed unless caught in criminal activities.
But when everybody's kind of doing the same thing, there's a false sense of safety in numbers. If JP Morgan's doing it, and if Morgan Stanley's doing it, and Merrill Lynch is doing it, it must be okay.
From the time you guys started talking, Bear Stearns stock has fallen more than 38%.
Boom!
March of 2008, when Bear Stearns collapses, it starts to feel like, there's something bigger going on here. But it's really a global crisis and cuts to the core of our financial system, September 15th, 2008.
Employees of Lehman Brothers today as the Wall Street giant's stock went to zero.
Lehman Brothers collapses, and then nobody trusted anybody at all. I mean, that week, September 15th, 16th, 17th, that is when there was zero trust.
I gotta see inside.
So money stops moving in our economy, and you're in the early stages of a process that could lead to hospitals unable to pay for medicine, telephone companies, cell phone companies unable to pay their electric bill, power plants unable to pay for the fuel that makes them run. People are talking about an unrecoverable situation, that basically we would descend into something like the Dark Ages.
There's going to be a bailout.
Well, they had to. Cash would have stopped coming out of ATMs. They had to backstop this.
They knew the taxpayers would bail them out. They weren't being stupid. They just didn't care.
It's heartbreaking to see the level of corruption and fraud and how it all not only came into being, but was perpetuated for years and years and years, and how many people were making so much money and passing the buck, just assuming that nothing could ever go wrong because their backs were covered by ratings agencies or government intervention, and ultimately, their backs were covered. I mean, ultimately, everything came crashing down, and they were still bailed out. And no one who should have been held accountable really was.
At least we're going to see some of them go to jail. Right? I mean, they're going to have to break up the banks. I mean, the party's over.
I don't know.
It does seem like, well, the banks are all still there. There's no real change. They're still too big to fail. The regulations aren't really in place. It's kind of bloody stunning that it doesn't seem to have changed very much, and we could well end up in the same place very quickly.
The everyman is, of course, who suffers the most. Those guys at the top of the Wall Street banks all still went home with huge bonuses as it went down, and left the rest of the country in near financial ruin.
It's a lot of money. I get it. I can feel you judging me.
And our system doesn't have to be equal, it doesn't have to be generous, but it does have to be fair.
There were Senate hearings. I didn't want to say nothing happened. There was some shaming. But the people who, in my view, should have been pursued to the ends of the earth were not.
People are going to be doing what they always do when the economy tanks. They will be blaming immigrants and poor people.
The whole system is based on trust. You have to believe these institutions. We're believing them again. I mean, we are, right? Your money's in the bank. My money's in a bank. And we're back to believing in it. The alternative is chaos.
It's possible that we are in a completely fraudulent system.
And I think these are kind of the next big questions we should be asking, is how do you stop systems from falling apart, becoming corrupt, becoming irrelevant, becoming redundant? Because over and over again, you see that's what we have a problem with.
For 15,000 years, fraud has never ever worked. Eventually, things go south. When the hell did we forget all that?
To me, this is not a small lesson. It's not a lesson about finance. It's not a lesson about housing. It's a lesson about how do we want America to be, the world to be in the 21st century. And I think we want it to be very different. We have a chance of building an America that's fairer, that's healthier, that's more structurally sound.
I think the movie's not just about banking. It's about a group of outsiders who saw that the entire economy was broken, flawed, and corrupted.
Hey, gentlemen, let's get some money in here. Let's make some money. What do you say?
Everyone else was having a good time making lots of money. Nobody wanted to shout, stop the bus and want to get off, but they did.
Michael, how are you, guy?
I found something really interesting.
I want to short the housing market. But the housing market is rock solid.
They had just enough skepticism, doubt, and just enough insight to predict what really no one saw coming.
There's some shady shit going down, but trust me, it's fueled by stupidity.
They basically predict the financial collapse and the housing bubble crisis, and they find a way to sort of bet against the big banks and win.
The payoff is 200 to 1.
Kind of brilliant.
We identify with these people who are actually taking on the system, you know? People who are not heroic in traditional terms, and we're fully invested in hopefully the system going to hell, so they win.
These are guys who found a bubble, they bet against it, they realized it was bigger, they went, oh great, we're doing our job.
They do win, but then they start to have problems with it.
While the whole world was having a big old party, a few outsiders and weirdos saw the giant lie at the heart of the economy, and they saw it by doing something the rest of the suckers never thought to do. They looked.
When you do this business a long time and you uncover what really happens, you realize there's a lot of fraud that goes on, and it still goes on, and you know, it's all greed and fear.
Highest fraud rates since the 1930s. But did you know they're going up?
They all had to be unique enough individuals to have seen this thing coming when nobody else in the finance world did, right? So they were all by definition outliers.
How do you know the bonds are worthless? I read them. No one reads them.
You have basically 3 different stories. You have Michael Burry's story, who's the guy who got the ball rolling. He figured out that there was a problem very early on.
The housing market is propped up on these bad loans. It's a time bomb, and I want to short it.
Then you have the front point guys who come in a little later and they find a new way to short the housing market. And they're kind of established, they're kind of Wall Street guys.
Look, it's 2 very simple questions. Is there a housing bubble? And if there is, how exposed are the banks? Let's go.
And then you have Charlie and Jamie who come in, who are the young bucks who are just kind of figuring it out. Either we're right or we're wrong in a giant way.
Who's gonna tell us? Who understands this stuff? It makes no sense.
Who kind of function like an everyman because they don't really know what they're getting into either.
So Mike Burry of San Jose, a guy who gets his hair cut at Supercuts and doesn't wear shoes, knows more than Alan Greenspan and Hank Paulson.
Dr. Mike Burry, yes he does. My experience with Mike is that he has never become jaded by his involvement and his success. He's one of the most down-to-earth people you'll ever come across.
Are you being sarcastic with us, Mike?
I don't know how to be sarcastic. And he just looks for good opportunities wherever he finds them. I just know how to read numbers. It's not that he doesn't really care about upsetting other people, it's just that it doesn't really even register with him, you know? So it doesn't matter which highfalutin person might be disagreeing. If he disagrees with them, he disagrees with them. That's the end of it. Watch, it will pay. I may have been early, but I'm not wrong.
The quality in him that was really important was a social detachment from the financial system. He didn't see people face to face. He didn't interact with people in any way socially, really, mainly over the phone, mostly by email. Didn't even like the phone. And that detachment made him somewhat immune to all the noise, to the virus in the air, that this is all okay.
Somebody shorted 200 mil in mortgage bonds.
That was just with Deutsche. Word is he hit half the town.
The way that Front Point and Mark Baum learn about Burry's credit default swaps and the short on the housing bonds is a wrong number.
It was this guy talking about shorting housing bonds. Who bets against housing?
What was this guy's name?
Jared Vennett knows how to dress. This is a guy who can talk to lots of different people.
You smell that? What is that? What's that smell? I smell money.
Okay.
Jared has to go outside of his world and start looking for partners and just sort of take on the risk.
And Mark Baum, being the iconoclast that he is, goes, bring the guy in.
So how many people have you talked to about this trade?
A few. There's definitely some interest.
Which is why you're here talking to us, a wrong number.
Baum doesn't hold his opinion, doesn't suffer fools.
What do you do?
I'm in commodities.
Good luck with that.
But he's got the thing that all of our main characters have. He has integrity. You know, he's speaking the truth. He's not just chasing the dollar.
This guy walks into my office and says, banks got greedy, they lost track of the market, and I can profit off of their stupidity. Yeah, I want him to be right. He wants to punish the people who he perceives of as doing the wrong thing. But at the same time, he knows he's going to benefit from that. So it's not completely altruistic. You have no idea the kind of crap people are pulling, and everyone's walking around like they're in a goddamn Enya video.
He was always caustic and cynical. That was part of his nature. And so he was quick to see in a Wall Street setting that other people on Wall Street were a little stupid.
Hey, there's a bubble.
Mark, you sure?
Yeah, it's time to call bullshit.
Bullshit on what?
Every fucking thing.
The third character, or characters, are Jamie and Charlie. And they were just a couple of guys, really, in a garage in Berkeley.
That is so cool, but you guys are under the capital requirements for an ISDA.
By how much?
$1,470,000,000, so a lot.
We have only $30 million, which in bank language is not enough to be a player at the table. So we're always kind of kicked to the curb, and these real guys actually thought of themselves as, they call it the self-described iconoclasts and like not Wall Street guys. And that actually gives them some perspective, I think, on where the market is headed. Because if you're too close to it, you can't really see the big picture.
These kind of trades are totally out of the question.
You gotta call Ben. Let's call Ben!
Ben Rickard. Hey, Ben, it's Jamie.
Well, Ben Rickard, played by Brad Pitt, is a legit banker, but he dropped out.
You know you're not supposed to use this line.
He's kind of holed away from the main arteries of civilization.
You guys should start your own garden. Used wood ash and urine, help restore the soil.
He has a sage kind of wisdom. He's been through this, and he knows where this is all going.
Look, if you don't want the deal, you can just hang up. That's what I thought.
I always saw Ben Rickard as the old gunfighter who has to pick up his gun and go help the young guys who have gotten into trouble.
The system fucked up in a big, big way, and somehow we know before anyone else.
They kind of saw behind the curtain and they realized that there's a lot of bad stuff going on in finance, but the system hadn't caught up yet, and finally it kind of comes to head and everything comes crashing down, which we all experienced in 2007, 2008. Will you listen to me? They're gonna lose their houses, they're gonna lose their jobs.
If they bet against the housing market, and basically against the American economy as well, they're going to be earning money from what essentially ends up being the destruction of what they love and people around.
If we're right, people lose homes, people lose jobs, people lose retirement savings, people lose pensions.
Whoa, I just got really scared.
It's important to remember that all of these figures, there's human lives behind them, real people. And I think that's one of the things that Adam McKay, the director, was very keen on getting across, that this is a bad thing that happened.
Am I gonna have to leave?
These people were in the right time at the right place. They made the deal, but they have a conscience. So when it all goes off, when it happens, they're not happy, they're not delighted, because it's just sad.
Look, I get that this is personal for you, but we have a fiduciary responsibility.
No, we don't. Nobody's acting responsible.
Although its characters are walking a moral tightrope, the film never really is, because the film never celebrates the score that the characters pull off in the end.
Benny Klieger over at Morgan is taking out some heavy losses in the bond department.
What they realize is it's not just us, it's also them. And that's the cool moment of the movie, is where these guys who are so excited about this trade realize it's not a trade against someone else, it's a trade against themselves.
All this time I've been trying to figure out who I'm betting against, and it's Morgan Stanley, which is me.
All of them change because of that. If you meet the real people now, you can really see it in their eyes.
You realize that these people are crooks and they should be in prison.
These guys, they were stressed, they were saddened, they were disturbed by what they were seeing, and there was a little bit of a conflict inside because they were also benefiting from it.
They knew the taxpayers would bail them out. They weren't being stupid. They just didn't care.
Now we get to kick them in the teeth.
It really rattled some of them. It really upset some of them. The other ones, it made them angry. And all of them, there's a little part of them, they want nothing to do with Wall Street, yet it's what they do.
We live in an era of fraud in America. I thought we were better than this. I really did. I think Mark's a little heartbroken at the end because he sees the lowest type of human interaction and the saddest, most shallow, self-serving motives and morality in people. And you hope for better. You want to have higher expectations of your fellow man and your industry.
This isn't how I pictured it.
What'd you think we'd find?
I don't know. Grown-ups.
Banking, it's rife with entitlement and greed. That certainly hasn't changed.
The recession affected so many people, and I think it could have been prevented if there was just a little more awareness and a little more concern from all parts, the government, from the banks, from the consumers. And hopefully us telling the story will make people a little more aware of these flaws in our system.
Kind of begs the question, like, why were we not more angry? And why did we not all, like, stand up in the street and, like, demand that things actually really change?
I get it. I can feel you judging me. That's palpable. But hey, I never said I was the hero of this story.
I think people want heroes to be these pure heroes where it's just a shining journey and they're perfect the whole time, and it's not the way heroes work. Heroes never choose to be heroes, but they did the most important thing that a lot of us could stand to do, which is they were able to see reality where most of America was not.
People want an authority to tell them how to value things, and they choose it because it seems authoritative and familiar. And I'm not, and never have been, familiar.